Hear the whispers from within, balance to restore, ailings to relieve. Feel the nature keeping us, nature healing us, flowers, leaves, and roots within. Hear the mind calming you, soothing you, love and kindness inside out. Let the herbs from middle world heal. Welcome wellness, welcome wellness. It's revealed herbs, middle world herbs.
Hello and welcome to our Middle World Herbs Natural Wellbeing series, where we talk about restoring and maintaining health in safe and natural ways while incorporating both the physical and emotional sides of healing. We go live twice a week on Tuesdays and Fridays at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and each week we talk about a different aspect of health. Today's episode is called Busy Minds, and we are focusing on brain and cognitive health. We'll be talking with an expert about mental acuity, nootropics, and most recently, new research around human memory and focus. Also, stay tuned to learn about secrets to top cognitive performance. My name is Deanne, and I will be your host today. I'm here with our very special guest, Dr. Slavko. He is an associate professor of pharmacogenomics from NC State University and member of the Plants for Human Health Institute. So Dr. Slavko, welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's Busy Minds Cognitive Health episode of our Natural Wellbeing series. I am so excited to learn about this. I feel like my mind is always busy, and this time of day I seem to get that brain dip, so I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Would you mind briefly just introducing yourself and just a little bit about your journey towards plants and human health?
Hello, Dan. It's a pleasure as always to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of the show and to have an opportunity to interact with your audience. Myself, I'm Associate Professor of Pharmacogenomics with NC State University, and I'm also a founder of mobile discovery programs that engages student and ethnic communities in global health research. In my lab, we basically focus on expertise in dietary interventions and technological innovations with a commitment to reverse the rise of metabolic and immune disease that you see in the world nowadays. I publish many articles and patent disclosures in biodiscovery from natural resources, including development and formulation of advanced food products and cosmetic solutions to improve the human health and well-being. Originally, myself, I'm from Ukraine. I got my bachelor in biology and chemistry from Kyiv National University, and then I gained my PhD in plant biology from Rutgers University in New Jersey.
Awesome. Well, hello to you as always, and also hello to Eva and Anne who are joining us. If anyone else is watching, feel free to introduce yourself. We'd love to get to know you more. Tell us where you're from. And if you haven't already, make sure you guys follow us. And before we jump into some Q&A, I wanted to introduce 3 amazing brain and nerve supporting supplements from Middle World Herbs. We have our Middle World Cognitive Support. That is right here. And then we have the mushrooms, and we have sleep support. And for those who just joined, I have some good news, because as promised, sleep support is now available. So we'll be discussing some of the amazing herbs which are in this supplements formula today. So as I mentioned earlier, hit that follow button if you haven't already. All right, Dr. Slavko, cognitive health is such a fascinating topic. And can you share with us some of your fascinating stories and what it has to do with our minds?
Well, sure. Let me ask you a question, Diane. I mean, are you aware of the fact that you have a horseshoe in your brain?
No.
It sounds strange, right? Well, yet it's not only you, myself included, and everybody else on Earth. We do have a horseshoe in our brains, and the horseshoe, it's basically a horseshoe-shaped structure, which is called hippocampus. And it's a structure which basically symmetrically can be found both in the left and the right side of our brain, and it connects the two. So it allows our hemispheres to basically talk to each other. This is a structure which is responsible for formation of many of the emotions and also the long-term memories. So basically, the hippocampus is involved in forming, organizing, and storing memory you create as you go through your life. And because of the hippocampus is symmetrical, It allows you to basically communicate from the left side of the brain to the right side of the brain, back and forth. And only when it's functional, the memories are actually created. So if you think about movies, right? If you think about Hollywood, and for a moment, try to remember any movie where they basically picture an amnesia. So basically, a person losing the ability to form memories, right? They almost all the time get it wrong. And the reason for it is, for example, there is a hero that goes on the street and hits a head and, basically claims that he doesn't remember anything that happened to them in the past. Well, in the real world, it's actually absolutely unusual to have this type of memory loss. And usually it's the opposite what happens. You lose the ability to form new memories, but your old memories often enough stay with you.
Interesting. Okay. So that just wouldn't make for as good of a movie, I guess.
It does.
Because that's like the movie where they wake up and then you have to convince them, no, we were married and these are our kids. And I mean, gosh, that like tugs at your heart. So it's all wrong in Hollywood. That's so fascinating. Very interesting.
It is. It's usually the opposite. You have to convince people that whatever they just didn't happen, or whatever they believe happened never happened before. Old memories most of the time are fine.
Wow, that's fascinating. Well, we definitely want to protect our brains so that we don't ever end up with amnesia, for sure. So let's talk about some frequently asked questions with cognitive health. Those are things that we often wonder about. So how about forgetting things once in a while, or if it's occasionally a struggle to focus, when is that like normal, and when should we be sounding some alarm bells?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about me, it's normal every day. You always forget something, right? And most of the time, those things are minor, so they don't basically impact our lives. And this is really normal. This is normal for a younger person. And obviously, as we age, chances are that we forget things a little bit more. So we forget a word here and there. We forget where we put our keys. We forget the name of the neighbor, even that we bumped on that neighbor like 20 times in the past. But these are small memory lapses, right? They do happen. They happen all the time. They just accumulate with age. It's a normal part of aging. Basically, it's the same way as your knees start to hurt, as your skin, develops some wrinkles, as your vision becomes a little bit blurry. It's that part of aging, and I mean, most of the time you kind of have to accept it because that's the natural path of things. And there is a way to deal with that too, right? If your short memory is not very good, and it interferes with your life, you can always write yourself a little note to remember the most important things that you need to do throughout the day. You can kind of develop routines where you're putting the keys in the same place always, and because of that, it's not an issue anymore. Or you can use your brain, right? I mean, there are a lot of research which shows that if you keep practicing and keep pushing your brain to the limit, it actually performs better, even the age brain, even in an older person. Keep using your brain, keep trying to solve puzzles, keep trying to interact with new sources of information and unknown sources of information, because your brain is a very curious creature. So as long as you provide all the extra inputs for it, it will respond. Now, there is also a symptom of more serious memory loss. And that's when you are not aware of the problem. So basically, remember when I talked to you about two different types of amnesia? This is the one that's dangerous. This is when it's not like you remember about forgetting things, but you don't notice it. So basically, you face people coming to you and saying, well, you just asked that question 10 times, or, well, you just did it. Or, for example, you look around and find yourself on the street and you don't remember how you got there. This type of memory loss, it's a completely different symptom. This is when it's probably time to listen to your family members who are worried about you and talk to a medical specialist.
Yeah, definitely. And so that's good though that you've normalized when you walk in a room and you go, what the heck did I walk in here for? Because I think we all do that.
Yep.
I do that. But at least
Be
if
careful
you're
with that.
recognizing it, then that's a good sign. So there's the first part. So how about as a rule of thumb, cognitively, you always hear it's like downhill after 40. Is there any truth to that?
Yes and no. It's downhill, but the hill is different for every single person, right? So as we go through our life, whether it's genetics, whether it's environment, whether it's both, and most likely, each of us is walking our own hill. So for some people, it will be very high but very steep hill. For some people, it will be a small hill which is kind of rounded, shaped, and the slope just goes forever. And there's not much you can do about it. It's just you're born with that hill. So you will be going downhill. You will be losing your memories. You will be losing your brain skills, so to speak, right? And this is a condition which is called mild cognitive impairment. So basically, um, some memories or some thinking problems become more and more difficult as you age, right? And usually it's again a normal part of aging. So you do have to worry about it, but there's not much you can do about it. So you have to learn to live with it. It can be one of the first signs of Alzheimer's disease. However, not every single person who develops mild cognitive impairment actually develops Alzheimer's. So for that, again, you kind of have to be careful and observe yourself every day.
Okay, definitely. So anyone who is, Anne said it happens to her too, walking in the room. So I'm glad we're not alone. Anyone else who has any questions or comments, feel free to put it in the chat. We have Dr. Slavko on today, and we are talking about brain and cognitive health. And Dr. Slavko, I have another question for you. Is it true that we use only 10% of our brain?
Well, Diane, let me answer that with a joke. Think about how smart an average person is in your mind, okay? And now, just think about the fact that half of the people on Earth are less smart than that. Okay, so there's a variety. There's a variety of situations, right? And by all means, 10% of the brain is absolutely false claim. You use all your brain, and you use all your brain all the time. And the only instances where you don't use some parts of your brain is because you either develop a disease in those parts, or there's actually a physical damage, right? So you hit your head, or for those people who are in combat situations, they can be wounded in many different shapes and reasons for it. But the moment you develop a physical damage in the brain, when you have the inflammation in that region, that part of the brain can be less functional or cease to function altogether. However, when your brain is intact, you use it all the time. Now, you don't use it for thinking all the time, all 100% of it, right? But your brain works in the background to maintain everything else in your body, right? You're breathing, you're moving, your digestive system is functioning, you're secreting the hormones which go into your bloodstream and travel around the body. Your brain is responsible for all that, and different parts of your brain, they maintain all these activities in a perfect harmony for you to exist. And obviously, even from the evolutionary point of view, the 10% claim doesn't make any sense. There is no point to evolve such a big brain if we weren't.
Definitely. No, that makes sense. One thing Eva's saying in the chat is just we can't see the bottom part of your face when you lean forward. So maybe just like sit back a little bit. There you go. What happens is your name cuts off half your face. So yeah, that's cool. All right. So another question for you. We often hear that people are left-brained or right-brained. Is there any scientific evidence that people are dominated by one side or the other?
Again, there is no precise answer to that question. People are often described as left brain thinkers when they have strong math and logic skills, and then as a right brain thinkers when they have more talents in the area of arts or creative side of things. There is some truth to that, right? Because different areas of the brain are connected to a little bit different to the things. But the historical reason why we are talking about the left part and the right part of the brain is very simple. Uh, very long time ago, probably hundreds of years ago, we already figured out that a lot of neural pathways in our brains, they actually cross, right? So we know that the left hemisphere, for example, controls the muscles on the right side, and then hemisphere controls the muscles on the left side. So from that kind of a crossover, right, when we didn't know the facts about anatomy, we didn't know how the neural system was working, people kind of developed the notions that there are two different parts of the brain and they are not equal, right? And they are specifically more related to one function or another. To a certain extent, it is true. Like, for example, if you're thinking about the language and the verbal communication, right? One side of your brain is a little bit more active about it than the other one. However, both hemispheres work together, and again, they use the hippocampus, the horseshoe in your brain, to talk to each other, and they communicate all the time to make sure that that function is actually developed properly. So all in all, yes, there is some specificity and some differences between the left and right hemisphere, but by no means it is the same as the general public thinks about it, that you are the left side brainer and you are the right one. That thing doesn't exist.
Okay, really good to know. All right, well, let me talk a little bit about our supplements right now. So I have with me right here our cognitive support formula. This one has 5 milligrams of alpha GPC and 120 milligrams of leaf extract from a small plant with beautiful white flowers called Bacoba monnieri. And it also has herbal extracts from ginkgo biloba. I'm going to probably say these things wrong, but that's why we have Dr. Slavko here and St. John's wort. But did I get it right? Okay, good. And also a couple other herbal extracts as well. So Dr. Slavko, he will talk a little bit more about the plants and their properties in a moment. But each bottle, you're going to get 60 veggie capsules. The dose is 1 capsule daily, and it is $24.99. But right now during our lives, we offer an additional 20% off. So you just click the little banner, and then it automatically applies at checkout. So make sure you jump on that. And now let's spend just a few minutes talking about alpha GPC. So Dr. Slavko, what does all the excitement about alpha GPC, where does that even come from?
All right, so let's talk about the name first, right? So alpha GPC, it basically stands for alpha glycerol phosphate choline, right? So there are two parts to the molecules. There is a glycerol phosphate and a choline, and they are connected by the alpha type of the bond. That's why it's alpha GPC. The reason that we are talking about alpha GPC when we talk about possible boost and possible cognitive performance and enhancement of cognitive abilities is because the alpha GPC, it's a very interesting form of choline, right? Choline is a chemical which is quite abundant in our diet, and brain requires choline to perform a lot of different things, including the production of acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter in our brain, right? This is a molecule that basically helps our neurons to communicate and also protects the nerves from overexcitement, so to speak. So alpha GPC, it's a unique structure of this molecule, whereas the choline molecule, the one that actually is doing the positive effects in your brain, is fused to glycerol phosphate that allows it to be more soluble and easier in crossing the membranes, specifically the blood-brain barrier. So this form of choline, it's let's say more easy to ingest orally, and also more easy to develop and deliver to the brain tissue. Because of this reason, it may help with age-related cognitive decline and dementia, and sometimes also with the early onset of Alzheimer's. By no means it prevents the disease, right? Don't get me wrong, it doesn't. But it will allow you to manage the symptoms better, and it will also allow you to delay the onset of certain symptoms. Now, alpha GPC is also popular with younger people. So many students use it because they believe that it enhances cognition. But the nootropic effects of alpha GPC are much less researched, right? So there's no final verdict on it. You know, some research groups say that yes, you can use it as a nootropic as well. Some research groups say that they don't observe these effects in their studies. Now, FDA, right, the ultimate judge for these things, it determines that the intake of about 200 milligrams per person per day is considered as generally recognized as safe. So basically, if the dose of alpha GPC that you are taking is less than 200 milligrams per day, you are generally in a safe zone, which means that most likely you're not harming your body in any way, and you can freely supplement yourself with alpha GPC to gain some advantages in brain and neuronal health.
Yeah, great. And this is 5 milligrams, so in the dose. So you're not getting even nearly that many. So we're definitely in the safe zone here. So we know that dopamine can play a role in how we feel pleasure. Is there any evidence that alpha GPC can raise our dopamine levels?
So alpha GPC works fast, and it helps to deliver choline to the brain, and in that way, it actually increases the production of acetylcholine, right? Just like I mentioned. And with that, acetylcholine is the active molecule that has ability to enhance the release of dopamine. So yes, alpha GPC enhances the release of dopamine, but it does it indirectly by mediation the activity of acetylcholine. And also, right, once you talk about molecular biology, obviously there are calcium ions, there are other cell membrane phospholipids, which are being cleaved and used as a message in the molecular signaling pathway to basically perceive the message that alpha GPC is carrying and then transform it into activation and release of acetylcholine, which in turns release dopamine. So as a verdict, yes, alpha GPC will raise dopamine levels and most likely will benefit the brain and our mood function significantly.
Okay, really interesting. So we know that alpha GPC is a stimulant. So would we expect it to have an effect of like wake up and focus like coffee does on our body?
Right. So it does have weak stimulatory properties, and it's relatively similar to caffeine, with one exception. It doesn't give you the jitters that caffeine does for many people. So basically, both alpha GPC and caffeine supplementation was shown to improve both mental health and the physical performance. And specifically, alpha GPC administration increases the release of several neurotransmitters, which facilitate learning and memory. So there was many studies on both alpha GPC and caffeine, but one study which was released in 2015, I find it particularly interesting because they did a head-to-head comparison, right? So in this case, they actually took quite a large dose. It was 400 milligrams of alpha GPC versus 200 milligrams of caffeine, and obviously placebo as a third group, and it was a properly randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled crossover design trial with 20 subjects, right? So it's not a very large study, but 20 subjects is often enough to see certain trends. And what they found out is that people who were taking alpha GPC, they have about 10 to 15% increase in their ability to perform a serial subtraction test. And this is one of the standard tests that researchers use in order to quantify how capable you are in using your mental abilities. And in the same test, caffeine gave only 7 to 10%. So looking at those two numbers, we can say that alpha GPC is very similar to caffeine, maybe a little bit better than it, but it doesn't give you jitters, and that's a big advantage for those people who are sensitive to caffeine.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, in some countries in Europe, alpha GPC is a prescription medication. So in the US, it's only available as a dietary supplement. So let's discuss the safety of taking it. Is it okay to take it on a regular basis, or should it just be like as needed? Like you have a big presentation coming up. What do you think? He just froze. There
All
you
right,
are.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what happened. The screen just jumped.
Oh, that's okay. You're back.
So, okay, we're good. So yes, so the question is the difference between United States and Europe, right? Where the alpha GPC is regulated in some of the European countries.
Yep.
The reason for it is very straightforward, right? As you know, there is a big difference between pharmaceutical drugs and dietary supplements. Pharmaceutical drugs are developed in a rigid way and they are designed to treat, cure, or prevent medicinal diseases, right? Dietary supplements, they cannot hold that claim. We can use them to support and improve symptoms of different conditions and basically support our lifestyle. So the reason why alpha GPC is prescribed in some countries in Europe is because it was developed there as a medicine, right? So basically, several industry groups picked up the bioactive principle, so the pure alpha GPC, and they developed it as a drug. Once you develop something as a drug, you cannot market it as a dietary supplement and you cannot sell it as a dietary supplement. And for that reason, it's basically available to people in those countries only by prescription. In this country, FDA doesn't recognize, well, I assume there was no industry group who tried to develop alpha GPC as a drug, and FDA doesn't recognize alpha GPC in a drug, which means it can be used as a dietary supplement.
Okay, great. And then the second part of that question was just, should we use it as needed? So let's say you have a big test coming up or something you need full cognitive support on, or should it just be something you regularly take?
Okay, so you probably, know me by now. I always say you should not use something forever, right? So like with anything else in life, you want to have an on and off cycles where you know, whether it's your diet, whether it's your lifestyle, whether it's your habits, whether there's things that you do. If you do something all the time, your body get used to it, and by that it becomes desynthesized, right? So like with everything else, I would not use alpha GPC all the time, and not for the safety reason. It's generally safe, and especially if used at a dose at less than 200 milligrams per person per day. That's what FDA tells us, right? It's GRAS, generally recognized as safe. So you should be fine from that point of view. But what I would imagine that your body will build up some kind of tolerance to it. So a general recommendation that I have for a situation like this, try it for several weeks, see if you are perceiving any benefits from this type of supplementation, and if you do, don't really supplement yourself for longer than 6 months, right? Take a break. What happens, give some time for your body to recharge and readjust, and then if you feel the need for it, supplement it again.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, I love that. So among the herbs which are known for improving cognitive function, there's Bacopa monnieri, Ginkgo biloba, and St. John's wort. So could you talk a little bit more about the herbs that are found in this?
Sure, it's an interesting trio, and each plant in that group has a different history and a different type of phytochemical profile, different types of phytoactives which it contains, and because of that, slightly different effects, right? So the first one, the Bacopa monnieri, or it's also known as a water hyssop, so it sounds a little better, right? It comes to us from Ayurvedic traditional medicine, right? So it comes to us from the old Asian tradition of India. And in that part of the world, they often call it as a Brahmi plant, right? So basically a sacred plant. And they specifically do that because they believe that this plant improves memory and is also can be used to treat different ailments. The best characterized phytochemical in Bacopa monnieri is a triterpenoid saponin, right? And they are known under, it's a group of compounds. They are specifically known under the group of bacosides. And they are responsible for the observed effects, right? So there is significant amount of studies and literature on the plant. So there is no doubt that the phytochemical composition of that plant has something to do with improved memory if supplemented correctly. Okay, the second plant that you ask, it's ginkgo, right? I mean, everybody probably knows the history of ginkgo. It's a plant native to China, and it's unique in a way that it's a very last living species of the whole large group of plants which appeared on Earth about 300 million years ago, so before even the flower plants were developed. And existed in a fossil record for quite some time, I believe 100 to maybe 150 million years, and then disappeared, with the exception of the single species, which is Ginkgo biloba. It's found in some small valleys in the mountains in China, and it didn't survive in nature until today. So basically what happened somewhere early in human history, people developed liking for the plant, whether because of its biological property or because it looks so pretty. And I mean, everybody knows what I'm talking about. I mean, ginkgo plants are gorgeous. They have this unique architecture, whereas the branching is happening on a symmetrical level. And also their leaves are nothing like you've seen in other plants, and they turn beautiful yellow colors when the autumn comes. So it was not domesticated, right? But basically it was collected in nature and brought into the human houses, into the human backyards. And this is the only way that the species survived. Basically, the plant is extinct in nature, and the only way that we have it is because we cultivate it. Now, extracts of ginkgo have quite complex phytochemicals that contain many phenolic acids, proanthocyanidins, flavonoid glycosides. And for that reason, it was used both in traditional Chinese medicine and nowadays more in a Western holistic medicine as one type of the plants which is promoted for supporting cognitive function and improving memory. Research on this plant, it's split 50-50. There are a lot of research groups that see the effects, but there are also a lot of groups that don't. So the final verdict is pretty much undecided at this point. We are not really sure that there are true cognitive enhancers which are found in this plant. Let's leave it at that. There are still plenty of groups which are doing research on the plant, so that may change in the future. But for now, the science is really undecided. Now, the last one that you mentioned is the St. John's wort, and this plant is native both to Europe and Asia. It pretty much transcends the whole continent all the way from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific coast. And it's been used for its medicinal properties since classical antiquity. So it was always a standard component of theriacs, and theriacs were these famous Greek and then later ancient Rome medicines which were supposed to increase stamina, increase memory, improve emotions, and basically overall improve the well-being of a person. Folk usages included two things for the most part. So they separately used St. John's oil because it has very pretty red color, and it's one of the most effective treatments for wound healing. So St. John's wort oil was a very popular component of a lot of treatments and interventions that addressed healing of the wounds. And then the leaves and the flowers of the plant were grown in the medicinal gardens all over Europe for a very long time, and nowadays they are growing commercially in many parts of the world, and they are used extensively both in herbalism and traditional medicine to manage mood disorders and emotional disorders.
Okay, wow, that's a lot. And then we also have L-glutamine in here. There's 150 milligrams. Can you touch real quickly on why this amino acid is important for brain health?
Right, so glutamine is basically a part of, let's say a group of 3 different chemicals. It's glutamine, glutamate, and gamma aminobutyric acid, GABA, right? And these are the essential amino acids for brain metabolism and function. So there are certain types of brain cells which are called astrocytes, which produce glutamine inside the brain, right? They release it as a precursor for glutamate. So this is the excess excitatory neurotransmitter, and GABA, which is inhibitory neurotransmitter. And both of them work together to basically regulate the activity in your brain, right? Because I mean, you know very well that the way that we think, everything is based on the neuronal impulses, right? And when the impulse goes across the neuronal cells, two things happen. You have to basically provide the excitation to the neuron. You have to excite it, and then you have to make sure that the signal is being stopped, so the neuron is ready to obtain another signal again, right? So you have to excite and then immediately inhibit, and this is the way that we transmit the signals. So glutamine plays one of the critical roles because it serves as a precursor for these neurotransmitters. So basically it helps our brain to function. Now, one very interesting thing is that if you think about all the glutamine which is produced in our bodies, about 90% of it is produced by our muscles, and only 10% of them produced by brain.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy. All right. Well, if anyone else has questions, please put them in our chat. We have Dr. Slavko. And also, if you're finding our series helpful and interesting, make sure you hit that follow button. Plus, you can also follow at Middle World Herbs. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. There's a lot of helpful information about medicinal plants, emotional healing, and natural wellness there. And you might be wondering what these little charms are that are attached to the supplements. These are called the Middle World Whisper. They're a handmade charm with a positive affirmation, a message, or some inspiration. And every single time you buy a supplement, you're going to get a different Middle World Whisper. So this one here says, the mind and body aren't separate. Wellness of one influences the other. So each time you just have like a cool thing to think about. And the backstory on them is really interesting too. Really quickly, our founder went to Bergamo, Turkey, and went to the ruins of the Asclepian temple. And there's this tunnel, and there's little cracks of light that come through the tunnel. And back in the ancient days, the healers would be where the cracks were, and they would say positive affirmations and mantras and messages as the patient slowly walked through the temple and through this tunnel. So that was all part of the healing. It was combining both the physical and the emotional side of healing together. So the founder went there and felt so inspired and realized, you know what, in the supplement industry, we focus so much on the physical, but not enough on the emotional side. So she kind of brought those two together with the whispers. So Dr. Slavko, I mean, right now, especially, it is so important to have a focus on both our emotional and physical healing. And sometimes our feelings of like worry, anger, grief can trigger some real physical processes. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. It's a very difficult question, right? The mind and health connection, so mind-body connection, because we don't really understand what the mind is. I mean, with all this time that we spend studying the mind, we still don't really know how it exists in our brain and where it emerges from and how it interacts with our body. So what we do know is, right, that there is a very tight connection between our neuronal system and our endocrine system. Basically, a lot of glandular tissue which produces and secretes hormones, so our endocrine tissue, has direct innervation from the nerves which originate in a brain. Which means technically that every kind of thought, any kind of feeling which is generated by your mind can be translated into neuronal impulse, which will travel all the way down to the endocrine tissue and will release or prevent the release of the hormones, right? And by that, it basically will affect most of the things which happen on or within your body. So the connection exists, right? And there is a plausible mechanism, at least we kind of think that we know how to explain it. But because of the vast neurotransmitters and the endocrine hormones in our bodies, we don't really know, at least yet, or we haven't really deciphered yet the exact network of communication. Right, so there are a couple of examples. For example, we know that depression is associated with very high risk of chronic illnesses, right? We are talking about metabolic chronic illnesses. We're talking about inflammation, heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes. The connection exists. However, we don't really understand where is the chicken and where is the egg, right? And how exactly depression is connected to all these risk factors, and whether it's depression that causes them, or whether basically the risk factors change the quality of our life to the point that they cause depression. And the truth most probably is somewhere in between, as always. But the system is so incredibly complex that we don't have a good handle of it yet. Another example that I'll give you, a lot of major mental illnesses, right, are associated with higher rates of death. So these people usually have shorter lives. And again, a lot of this, it's a mind-body connection, because obviously if you don't have a healthy mind, you probably also will not have a healthy body. But the exact connection is a very different point. People who are critically depressed, they also show a lot of different physical symptoms, which on the first thought are unrelated, like constipation, lack of appetite, insomnia, or lethargy, among many different things. Again, a clear example that there is a connection between the mind and the body. And again, for the most part, as a scientist, I have to admit we don't really understand how the connection works.
Okay, yeah, lots of info there too. So I have two more supplements I want to get to. We have about 10 minutes each to spend on them. So our next one is our middle world mushrooms. And Dr. Slavka, what are mushrooms like best known for with their benefits for cognitive health?
Okay, so there are two mushrooms which are mostly famous for emotional stability and cognition effects. And those are the lion mane, which is probably one of the most famous one. It's definitely known to protect cognitive health, and the way that it's doing it, and here as a scientist I can actually say that we do understand it a little bit. There are certain types of proteins in our brains which are called the neuronal trophic factors. So basically they are so-called, I'll just make up the word, feeding proteins. They help to make sure that our neurons are healthy and they are fed properly, that they are developing properly, and that they communicate properly. So basically, they are nerve growth factors, and they promote healthy brain cells. So lion's mane, in its tissue, has certain type of chemicals which stimulate, when they arrive in the brain tissue, they stimulate the production of the nerve growth factors, and by that they support some degree of creativity, motivation, and memory improvement, as well as a healthy brain function. The second mushroom, which is quite known for effects on the motivation and memory, is reishi. And the mechanism is exactly the same, although the group of compounds is different. They also stimulate nerve growth, promoting proteins in our brains, and this is communication between different neurons in different parts of our brain. So because of that, there are several studies which were done and published that proved to a certain degree that reishi mushrooms can be protecting in brain conditions. And one of the interesting conditions, at least in my opinion, is actually brain seizures. So there are some positive effects in subjects which were taking reishi mushrooms on the frequency and duration of the seizure. Now, one thing that unites these two mushrooms is also their relatively high niacin and copper content. And these two basically vitamin and micronutrients which are found in the mushrooms, they promote the function of the nervous system in a way to keep the nerves healthy. Mushrooms also additionally contain vitamin B5, and it's necessary for production of different hormones which play an important role of functioning in the brain. So altogether, if from all the mushrooms which are on the market today, if I have to focus on two of them, that would be the lion's mane and the reishi mushroom.
Okay, awesome. Well, I want to show everyone the capsule of what it kind of looks like. It's got this real earthy light brown color with a little bit of like a whitish particle in there, which is probably the lion's mane. It has 5 mushrooms in there. So there's lion's mane, chaga, miyatake, shiitake, and reishi. And of course, you're going to get a whisper too. This one says, every day is a new beginning. These are veggie capsules. There's 60 per bottle. And right now they're on Amazon for only $15.99. Plus, don't forget, during our live, you're going to get an extra 20% off. So make sure you pop that in your cart right now. They are made in the USA, GMP certified, and thoroughly tested by third-party labs. Middle World Herbs does microbial testing, heavy metal testing, identity testing, pesticide, and strength testing. And now let's talk about the quality of the mushroom supplements for a moment. So some mushroom supplements say fruiting bodies only. And is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, you have to start to define what mushroom is, right? So the largest part of the mushroom, if we find a mushroom in the nature, is actually under the ground and we don't see it, right? It's only when you start to disturb the soil, like if you lift the branches, all dirt leaves, or you start digging into the soil, you see those white powdery mycelium networks. They are basically, they look almost like spider webs. But they are underground, and this is how the mushroom grows, right? So this is what's called mycelium. These are mushroom cells which are organized into the filaments, which grow through the soil, very similar to plant growth. And mushroom uses those mycelium outgrowths to absorb nutrients from the environment. Now, in cultivation, right, when we as scientists grow mushrooms, we have to provide some kind of a nutrient substrate for the mushrooms. So we usually take a mycelium and we put it on a substrate, whatever that substrate is, and the substrates are quite different for different type of mushrooms because in nature they like to feast on different types of plant decay, different type of wood, even sometimes living plants. So as you grow mushroom cultures, you have to provide the substrate for them. So often enough, the mycelium products come from those substrates. And now this is a big difference between the good manufacturer and a bad manufacturer, because the good manufacturer will try to purify the mycelium or grow mycelium in a substrate where they can separate the mycelium from the substrate itself, and this way basically have a product with a higher potency. While the bad manufacturer will take the mycelium and the substrate, grind it into the powder and put it into the pill. When you see a supplement which is labeled as a fruiting body, it basically means that the mycelium emerged from a substrate and formed a fruiting body, which is about 80% water and 20% mycelium. So when the fruiting body is collected and dried, so the water is evaporated, what remains, it's pretty much 100% mycelium. It's the same mycelium, same mushroom cells, however, they are present as a fruiting body. So in my mind, there's a little bit more value in products which are manufactured from fruiting bodies, or if they manufacture psyllium from which the substrates are removed.
Nice. And yeah, and these are exclusively from the fruiting bodies only, which is so great. So we've kind of known that medicinal properties of mushrooms have been used for generations. So why recently would you say they're back in the spotlight?
Well, I mean, the answer to this question, you know, humans been asking it forever, all the time, and one of the main reasons is because there are certain trends in human societies and human cultures. Right? Mushrooms is nothing new. We use mushrooms since we probably were aware that we are human beings. And one of the most famous examples that you can see how Asian people use mushroom is the example of Otzi. You probably heard about it, Diane. It's the Iceman, the Otzi, because of the Otzi valley where he was found on the border between Austria and Italy. This is a huge being which was dead probably for 5,000 years, if I can remember, and by the things that he was carried with him at the time of his death, we kind of figure out the story that he was somewhere up in the mountains and he had a battle with most likely another group of people. He was wounded and he was trying to hide in one of the caves in the mountains and unfortunately succumbed. However, the most interesting part about it was the bag that he was carrying with him. And among different other things, they're one of the two oldest examples of mushrooms, and specifically probably medicinal mushrooms, that he was using for different purposes. So the first mushroom that he had a necklace, right, which was basically a series of birch polypore bodies which were dried and then string together on a string. And I mean, by modern standards, we know that the birch polypore is a medicinal mushroom. So there is a big chance that that man was carrying the birch polypore necklace in a way as to basically carry the birch polypore with him. And also, he was carrying the remnants of a different fungus. It's called a tender polypore, which is a mushroom that can be used as a blood absorbent. So people basically use the powder of the mushroom to put into the wounds to prevent and stop bleeding. And also, you can use it as a fire starting kit. So it's a powder that ignites very easy. And the question remains, which exactly they use Otzi planned for that mushroom, but he was also carrying it in a bag. So mushrooms follow the human history for quite a long time. And it just happens that we have a resurge in interest in the mushroom, both at the level of scientific groups, both at the level of industry. We are making so many different things from mushrooms nowadays, starting from furniture to bricks to leather. So very soon, probably you will see some of your boots made from mushroom leather. Surprise, surprise. Yeah. And I think general public responds to that very positively. One of the unique things about mushroom is that you can grow it at home, and it doesn't require skills. I mean, you can go online and probably learn the basics of mushroom cultivation in 1 to 2 hours. And that's probably one of the most important reasons why mushrooms are so popular today.
Very cool. Wow, that was such an interesting story. So basically, fire starting mushrooms. It's so interesting how many purposes there are to mushrooms. That's so cool. All right, well, before I talk about another amazing supplement from Middle World Herbs and our final one tonight, I do want to share one really cool thing that I love about this company. And if you didn't know it already, we plant a tree for every single supplement that is purchased. We've partnered with One Tree Planted to join them on the global reforestation mission. So by buying Middle World supplements, you are not only helping your own body, but helping the earth we all live in. And one supplement purchased is one tree planted, which is so awesome. And lastly, I have our amazing formula of Middle World Sleep Support. This supplement is brand new. It just launched this month, and we are really excited to hear how it's working for you. So if you consider support needed for occasional sleep troubles, or you travel, maybe you deal with some jet lag, give this a try. It is 20% off during our live, and it comes with a 60-day return policy. So Dr. Slavko, where do sleep problems come from, and which of our daily habits are harming our sleep the most?
Well, in a short, it's our modern lifestyle. When we existed as humans living free in nature, our body cycles and our sleep cycles were defined by the sun, right? So basically we were designed to wake up on the onset of the daylight because it probably wasn't too safe to sleep in an open field, right, when everybody can see you. And we were designed to go to sleep at night when we seek protection to make sure that we are hidden somewhere, and basically get rest during the nighttime when it's not safe to be outside. However, that changed when we invented so many different things, right? We invented we domesticated, so to speak, fire. We invented electricity. We invented the light bulb. We invented TV, and every little thing shines light at us, right? And this amount of light, an amount of light which basically doesn't come as a cycle, so it comes at any time, day or night. It depends on our lifestyle, our jobs, our family habits. It disturbs our sleep, right? And different people respond to it different. Like always, there are people who will say, well, I don't care. I really can function this way, and 4 hours of sleep is enough for me, and it's great. I mean, some people can really do that, but it's not the case for most of other people, right? A predictable cycle. A lot of bodies want to have basically a set schedule to which they respond with a known set of physiological and emotional functions. All of us are a little bit autistic in a way that we do like to have rigid schedules, right? And the modern lifestyle just doesn't allow that to happen.
Okay, so when do we know if it's like a real problem, you need professional help, or you're just like sleepy?
Oh, it's probably, the simple answer is just judge for yourself how much it affects the quality of life, right? If it's occasional sleep trouble because you're facing some troubles in your life and you're overthinking something, or if you are partying too hard for 3 days and then obviously you have problems of staying awake at night and sleeping during the day, those things are normal, right? And if given some time, they kind of tend to revert back to normal, because our bodies are amazing as bringing things back to norm and to homeostasis if you allow them to do that. However, if it becomes more than a routine, right? So if you go to sleep at night and every single night it's insomnia, right? So every single night you basically find yourself not sleeping enough and waking up tired all the time, it's probably the time to seek some external help.
Okay, good to know. So let's talk a little bit about our sleep support. We have the following ingredients in the formula. There's 200 milligrams of magnesium citrate, and I want to highlight that because magnesium citrate is the kind of magnesium you want to see in your supplements. It is one of the best absorbed types of magnesium. It's also known for its calming properties. And then there's L-theanine, 400 milligrams, GABA, 100 milligrams, and 5-HTP, 50 milligrams, and of course the melatonin. So additionally, the formula includes extracts from the seeds of mucuna and philodendron root powder. There's 60 per bottle, and right now on Amazon they're only $29.99 per bottle, but of course you're getting your additional 20% off. So make sure you get that. And I think we have time for just like one or two more questions on it. So can you help us demystify some of those ingredients and compounds that I spoke of that are in this formula?
Right, so both the theanine, GABA, and 5-hydroxytryptophan, so 5-HTP, these are either amino acids or modified amino acids, and they all fall into the pathway of amino acid metabolism, which kind of connects to some of the stories that I was telling a little bit while ago. Remember when we were talking about GABA being a neurotransmitter, which helps the neuron to basically transduce the signals between each other and helps them to get excited and then basically inhibit them to make sure that they relax. So these are the compounds which are responsible for it. And inhibition, right? So basically relaxation and having time to kind of rewind and reset is very critical for our body. So these compounds altogether, they the amino acid metabolism and synthesis of neurotransmitters, and basically assist our brain in maintaining the physiologically relevant concentration of these neurotransmitters in our bodies. One of the most famous examples where they come from, I mean, you remember Thanksgiving and eating turkey? Well, meat has a lot of tryptophan and hydroxytryptophan, and when you overeat on turkey, a lot of that tryptophan goes directly into your brain and causes sleepiness, right? So it does help you to sleep a little bit. I mean, often enough it's unwanted when you're sitting right there at the table, but that's a natural and physiological response to basically supplementing your body with tryptophan and similar amino acids. And now a lot of the dietary supplements on the market, they also get these compounds from different plant extracts. So there are some plants which are naturally rich in, for example, 5-hydroxytryptophan, and then the molecule is extracted from basically plant tissues of those species.
Okay, yes, Eva said turkey coma. I feel like we've all experienced one of those in our lives. So in addition to supplementation, this is going to be our final question. Are there any like life hacks we can pick up for healthy sleep, like maybe having a plant in your room or spraying your pillow with lavender, keeping your temperature cold, anything like that?
There are different things that work for different people. So if you have your favorite one, if you basically stumbled on it by chance and it works for you, by any means don't listen to me and keep using that one, because that's what's working for you. But if you don't know which one, I mean, the first and usually the most significant thing is to eliminate additional sources of light in your room. I know a lot of people like night lights for their functionality, right? Because they allow us to see things in the room and they allow us to basically navigate the room in the dark. However, they're not very healthy for us. So one of the reasons why you are having a bad sleep often enough can be the external light, whether it's the light that comes through the window, whether it's the light that comes from inside the room, or whether it's a light that comes from a computer or your iPad or iPhone that basically gets into where excites the neurons in the eyes, which in turns transmits the signal to your brain, and your brain just refuses to go to sleep.
Okay, yeah, and I have 2 hacks. So I do, let's see, reading will help me go to sleep. Usually if I read a few pages,
you just have to pick a very boring book.
A very boring. I mean, I even pick books I love, but it's like it takes me a year to get through them because I read 2 pages.
No, if I find a very good book, I can read through the night.
You'll just keep going. Okay, so you're like the opposite of me. And then the other one that works for me is a meditation app on my phone. It's a free one, and I just search sleep meditations, and it lights out. It knocks me out, and I usually make sure my phone is turned down so that I won't have like the screen illuminate or anything. So those are the 2 for me. But yeah, and I mean, our little girls, dark curtains, the blackout curtains, make a huge difference, especially with their napping during the day. So I can attest to that, and keeping the room cold makes such a difference too. So it's amazing how those sleep habits start when you're really little, and then as you're older, you might forget to keep your room cold or have blackout curtains. So those definitely make a difference. And then, of course, we have our sleep support for anyone needing some extra support with that. So I think that's all the time we have. Is there anything else you want to mention, Dr. Slavko, before we head out?
I mean, I just want to stress the importance of mushrooms in our lives, right? Because for a very long time, we basically stopped eating them for one reason or another. I mean, most of the time they are picked in the wild. So a lot of people, especially in the Western world, especially in North America, they completely lost the tradition of picking the mushroom in the wild. So which means they lost the mushrooms in their diet. And mushroom is an excellent source of protein. It's very good. It contains high levels of certain vitamins and minerals. It's also relatively low in calories. So in general, right, also a little bit more difficult to digest. So people with digestive problems may have some troubles digesting mushrooms, but otherwise, if you have a chance, right, it doesn't really matter whether it's a dietary supplementation in a way that you eat whole fruit in bodies, or you take dietary supplements in the form of the dried fruit in bodies, which were packaged into a pill. Try to introduce more mushrooms and more variety of mushrooms into your diet, and I'm sure you will see some type of benefits both to the health and the well-being of your body.
I love that. I used to eat a lot of portobello mushrooms. I feel like I haven't lately, so that's going on my grocery list for next time. So yes, I love that. Love that ending too. So make sure you pick up your mushroom supplements and get them naturally and eat them as well. So that's great. We had a couple last minute things here. Eva says sleep meditation also works for her. Anne says reading always works for her. And Eva said when she used to live in Poland, she remembers going mushroom picking trips every fall. Oh, that's so cool.
That's right.
So, did you do that too in the Ukraine?
Oh yeah, I grew up picking mushrooms. I mean, starting in April when the morels come, all the way until December when the oysters come on the trees. I mean, it's a non-stop foraging.
That's so cool. Yeah, it's something I feel like us United States kids probably have missed out on. We don't quite forage for mushrooms as much.
But the most interesting thing is that you can do it. And you can do it in most parts of the country. I mean, most likely not the desert conditions of Arizona or like New Mexico, right? You have to go up in the mountains there to find some mushrooms. But for the rest of the US, I mean, especially Pacific Northwest, upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, even Carolinas, if you know what you're looking for, and if you go to the right place in the right time, you can find plenty of mushrooms.
That's really cool. We'll end with one quick story. I used to work in Oregon as a news anchor, and I did a news report on people that foraged mushrooms for a living. So I got to go out with them hunting mushrooms, and it was fascinating. And there was more than just the mushrooms. It was kind of their living style too. But it was a fascinating story. So that I have also foraged for mushrooms. I have done it, and it was really cool. All right, well, let's wrap up. We will be back again on Friday. We are live every Tuesday and Friday at 4 p.m. I hope you guys learned a lot about brain health and sleep support, and of course mushrooms. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Don't forget to follow us. Hit that follow button, and we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Hear the whispers from within, balance to restore, ailings to relieve. Feel the nature keeping us, nature healing us. Flowers, leaves, and roots within. Hear the mind calming you, soothing you. Love and kindness inside out. Let the herbs from middle world heal. Welcome wellness, welcome wellness. It's revealed herbs, middle world herb.